The underground prison of the Draconian Empire was a place of silence, darkness, and fear. Built deep beneath the surface of a hostile alien world, it was designed to hold the galaxy's most dangerous enemies. The walls were made of black steel stronger than any known metal, glowing faintly with red energy lines that pulsed like a slow heartbeat. No prisoner had ever escaped from this place. Most never even survived long enough to try. In the deepest chamber of this prison sat a human named InsteadThey. He was chained to the cold floor, his wrists locked in heavy restraints that hummed with suppressor energy. His clothes were torn, his face bruised, and his body showed the marks of endless torture. Yet his eyes remained calm. There was no fear in them, only quiet determination. The alien guards watched him from behind a reinforced glass wall. They were tall, armored creatures with glowing eyes and sharp claws, loyal servants of the Dragon Empress. For days, they had tried to break him. They had starved him, beaten him, and left him alone in the dark for hours. Still, the human refused to beg. He should be broken by now, one guard hissed in a low, metallic voice. He is only human, another replied. Humans are weak. He will fear what comes next. Above the prison, the sky darkened as a massive shadow passed over the fortress. Alarms began to echo through the metallic halls, low and steady, like the warning of an approaching storm. Every soldier in the facility straightened, their movements sharp with tension. "She is coming," the commander whispered. Moments later, the heavy doors of the chamber opened with a thunderous roar. Heat flooded into the room, turning the air dry and suffocating. The guard stepped back as a colossal figure emerged from the darkness. Zyraxis. She was the cruelest dragon in the entire Draconian Empire. Her scales were black as night, each one reflecting faint red light like burning embers. Her wings stretched wide, nearly touching the walls, and her glowing crimson eyes burned with ancient fury. Legend said she had destroyed entire planets, reducing cities to ash with a single breath of fire. No creature had ever faced her and survived. The ground trembled with every step she took. Ethan slowly lifted his head, his chains clinking softly against the floor. He looked at the dragon, his gaze steady, as if he were meeting an old enemy rather than a living nightmare. The guards waited eagerly. They had seen countless prisoners scream, cry, and beg for mercy at the sight of Zyraxis. Some had fainted before she even spoke. Fear was her greatest weapon. But InsteadThey did not scream. He did not beg. He smiled. The guards froze in shock. Even Zyraxis paused, her massive claws scraping against the metal floor. Her glowing eyes narrowed as she studied the human before her. "Why do you smile?" Her deep voice rumbled, echoing through the chamber like distant thunder. "Do you not understand who I am?" Ethan's lips curved slightly as he met her gaze. His voice was calm, steady, and clear despite the pain he had endured. "I know exactly who you are," he said. "You're the monster they send when they want someone to break." A low growl escaped Zyraxis, and the walls vibrated with its power. Flames flickered at the edges of her mouth, lighting the room with a terrifying glow. The guards stepped back, expecting the human to panic. But Ethan remained still. "I have watched worlds burn," Zyraxis said. "I have heard the screams of armies. Every creature fears me, even your kind." Ethan's smile did not fade. "Maybe they do," he replied softly. "But I don't." Silence filled the chamber. The dragon stared at him, confusion flickering behind her burning eyes. Never in her long and brutal life had anyone spoken to her without fear. She had seen kings kneel, warriors surrender, and entire civilizations collapse at the sight of her shadow. Yet this human, weak and broken, sat before her as if she were nothing more than a passing storm. "Why?" she demanded, her voice sharp with curiosity and anger. "Why do you not fear me?" Ethan lowered his gaze for a moment, as if remembering something painful. When he looked up again, his eyes held a quiet strength. "Because fear is something you can only feel when you still have something to lose," he said. "And I lost everything a long time ago." The words hung in the air, heavy and powerful. Zyraxis stepped closer, her massive form casting a dark shadow over him. She could feel no tremor in his heartbeat, no scent of terror in the air. Only calm defiance. The guards exchanged uneasy glances. This was not how the execution was supposed to unfold. The human should have been begging for his life by now. Instead, he was staring into the eyes of the cruelest dragon in the galaxy, and smiling. Zyraxis leaned forward, her fiery breath warming the air around him. "Then tell me, human," she said quietly, her voice no longer filled with rage, but with something unfamiliar. "What could make a creature like you fearless?" Ethan looked up at her and spoke without hesitation. "Hope," he said. "Hope that even monsters can change." The dragon's eyes widened slightly. For the first time in centuries, Zyraxis felt something she could not understand. A spark of curiosity, and perhaps something deeper. The chamber fell silent once more. Far above them, the Empire waited for the dragon to destroy the human. But deep within the prison, something unexpected had begun. The cruelest dragon had met the one man she could not break, and he was still smiling. The silence inside the prison chamber felt heavier than steel. Zyraxis stood motionless, her massive form towering over Ethan Hale. The faint glow of red energy lines reflected across her black scales, making her look like a creature forged from fire and shadow. Yet her blazing eyes were no longer filled only with cruelty. They now carried something unfamiliar: curiosity. Ethan remained chained to the cold floor, his calm smile still untouched by fear. The guard behind the reinforced glass whispered nervously. This was not how the execution was meant to unfold. The human was supposed to scream, to beg, to shatter under the weight of the dragon's presence. Instead, he simply waited. Zyraxis lowered her massive head, her breath hot enough to melt metal. Flames flickered gently between her fangs, casting dancing shadows across the walls. "You speak of hope," she said, her voice echoing like distant thunder. "But hope is a weakness. It makes creatures believe in things that do not exist." Ethan met her gaze without hesitation. "Hope is the reason I'm still alive," he replied quietly. "And it's the reason you're standing here, talking instead of killing." A low growl escaped Zyraxis, shaking the chamber. The guards tensed, expecting her to unleash her fury. But instead, she stepped back, her claws scraping across the steel floor. "Then prove it," she said coldly. "Prove that your hope is stronger than fear." With a sudden roar, she unleashed a wave of blazing heat that surged across the chamber. The energy restraints around Ethan glowed white-hot, and the air itself burned. Any ordinary being would have screamed in agony. But Ethan did not cry out. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, steadying his breath, and endured the heat without a sound. Sweat rolled down his face, yet his expression remained calm. When he opened his eyes again, he was still smiling. The guards stared in disbelief. Zyraxis narrowed her eyes. "Interesting," she murmured. "But pain alone is not enough." Her wings spread wide, and the chamber darkened as her power filled the air. Suddenly, the walls around them shimmered and shifted, transforming into a terrifying illusion. Ethan found himself standing in the ruins of a burning colony. Flames consumed the sky, and the ground trembled beneath his feet. The screams of innocent people echoed all around him. He saw shadows of soldiers falling, buildings collapsing, and dragons soaring above the destruction. It was his past, the day he lost everything. The illusion was perfect. The heat, the smoke, the fear, it all felt real. Zyraxis watched closely, expecting his calm to shatter. "Do you remember this?" she asked softly. "The day your world burned." Ethan stood silently in the middle of the devastation. His hands trembled slightly, and pain flickered across his face. For a moment, it seemed as though the dragon's test had succeeded. But then he took a deep breath. "Yes," he said quietly. "I remember." The illusion intensified. He saw his home collapse into flames. He heard the cries of his family. The sky burned red, and the roar of dragons filled the air. Yet Ethan did not fall to his knees. Instead, he looked up at the sky and spoke with quiet strength. I remember the fear, and I remember the day I decided it would never control me again. With those words, the illusion began to crack. Zyraxis's eyes widened slightly. No one had ever resisted her mind fire before. The vision shattered like broken glass, and the prison chamber returned to reality. Ethan stood where he had been all along, chained, wounded, but unbroken. You survived your greatest nightmare, Zyraxis said slowly. But survival does not make you strong. It only means you endured. Ethan shook his head gently. No, he replied. Strength is choosing who you become after the pain. The dragon fell silent. For centuries, she had been the Empire's weapon, feared, unstoppable, and merciless. She had never questioned her purpose. She had never needed to. Yet this fragile human spoke with a certainty that unsettled her ancient mind. Zyraxis stepped closer, her glowing eyes searching his face. Why do you believe I can't change? She asked, her voice quieter than before. I have destroyed worlds. I am cruelty itself. Ethan looked directly into her burning eyes. There was no hatred in his expression, only understanding. Because you haven't killed me, he said simply. The words struck her harder than any weapon. Behind a glass wall, the guards grew restless. Their commander activated a communication channel, his voice sharp with urgency. Zyraxis, he ordered. The Empress demands immediate execution. This experiment has gone on long enough. The dragon did not respond. Instead, she continued to stare at Ethan, as if seeing him for the first time, not as prey, but as something else entirely. Fear controls the weak, Ethan said softly. But choice defines who we truly are. The chamber trembled as Zyraxis's power surged once more. Flames flickered along her scales, and her wings spread wide. For a moment, it seemed she would obey the Empire's command. The guards watched eagerly, certain the end had come. But instead of striking, Zyraxis extinguished the flames. The chamber fell into complete silence. You are unlike any creature I have ever faced, human, she said slowly. Your courage is unexpected. Ethan's smile returned, calm and unwavering. I'm not fearless, he replied. I just refuse to let fear decide my fate. For the first time in her long and violent life, Zyraxis hesitated. Above them, the Empire waited for blood. Below, in the depths of the prison, something powerful was beginning to awaken. Not rage, not destruction, but the possibility of change. The cruelest dragon had begun her test, and the human was passing it. The prison chamber remained silent, but the air felt heavy with tension. Zyraxis stood motionless, her massive wings folded tightly against her body. The faint glow of the red energy lines reflected across her dark scales, but the fire in her eyes had changed. It was no longer pure cruelty. Something deeper was awakening within her, something ancient and forgotten. Ethan Hale sat chained to the floor, calm and steady. The heat from the dragon's breath brushed against his skin, yet his expression did not change. His quiet smile remained, not out of arrogance, but out of strength. Above them, hidden behind reinforced glass, the alien guards watched with growing unease. This was not supposed to happen. The cruelest dragon in the Empire was meant to crush the human spirit, not hesitate before him. Zyraxis lowered her head slowly, her glowing crimson eyes locking onto Ethan. Her voice, once filled with thunder, now carried a strange weight. You speak of choice, she said. You speak as if freedom is real. But I was not given choice. I was created for destruction. I exist only to obey. Ethan looked up at her, his gaze steady and understanding. Then why haven't you killed me? He asked softly. The question lingered in the air like a spark waiting to ignite. For the first time in centuries, Zyraxis had no answer. Her claws scraped lightly against the steel floor as fragments of ancient memories stirred within her mind. She remembered the day she was born, not in warmth, but in chains. She had never known kindness, never known peace. Only commands, only fire, only war. I have destroyed worlds, she said quietly, almost as if speaking to herself. Cities turned to ash beneath my wings. Entire civilizations fell because I was ordered to burn them. Ethan listened without fear, his calm presence steady like an anchor in the storm. And yet, he said gently, "We didn't destroy me." Zyraxis flinched slightly. His words pierced deeper than any weapon ever had. She had faced armies without hesitation, but this fragile human's quiet voice unsettled her in ways she could not understand. "Tell me," she demanded, her voice low and intense. "What happened to you? What made you this way?" "No creature stands before me without fear." Ethan's smile faded, replaced by a shadow of pain. For a moment, the strength in his eyes wavered, not from fear, but from memory. "I wasn't always like this," he said softly. The chamber lights dimmed as his voice carried the weight of his past. "I had a home once, a small colony on the edge of the Orion frontier. It wasn't much, but it was peaceful. My family lived there. My friends. We believed we were safe." Zyraxis remained silent, listening. Then the Empire came. Ethan continued. Dragons filled the sky. Fire rained from above. I watched everything burn. My home, my people, my entire world. I tried to save them, but I was too weak. His hands tightened slightly against the restraints. The memory still burned within him, fresh and painful. "I lost everyone that day," he whispered. "Everything I loved was taken from me in a single night." The silence that followed was deeper than before. Zyraxis's fiery eyes dimmed slightly as she listened. She had heard countless stories of destruction, but never from someone who spoke without hatred or anger. There was only truth in Ethan's voice. "So you hate me," she said quietly. "You hate all dragons." Ethan slowly shook his head. "No," he replied. "I hated what happened. I hated the pain. But hatred only creates more monsters. I chose something different." Zyraxis stared at him, confused. "Different?" she asked. "Hope," Ethan said simply. "Hope that the cycle of destruction could end. Hope that even the cruelest creature could choose a different path." The words struck her like thunder. For centuries, she had been feared, obeyed, and worshipped as a weapon of the Empire. No one had ever spoken to her as if she were more than a monster. No one had ever believed she could be anything else. "You believe I can change," Zyraxis said slowly, her voice trembling with something she had never felt before. "After everything I have done, you still believe that?" Ethan met her gaze without hesitation. "Yes," he said, "because I see something in you that the Empire never could." Before she could respond, alarms suddenly blared throughout the fortress. The chamber lights flashed red, and a powerful voice echoed through the prison. "Zyraxis," the voice commanded, cold and merciless. "Your hesitation is unacceptable. Execute the human immediately, or you will be destroyed." The Dragon Empress herself had spoken. The guards straightened with fear and obedience, their eyes fixed on the dragon. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The Empire would tolerate no weakness, no defiance. Zyraxis's wings slowly unfolded, casting a massive shadow over Ethan. Flames flickered along her scales as the command echoed in her mind. She had obeyed every order for centuries. She had never questioned, never resisted. But now, something was different. Ethan looked up at her, his calm smile returning. There was no fear in his eyes, only quiet faith. "You have a choice," he said softly. The dragon's heart pounded like thunder within her chest. The Empire demanded obedience. Her entire existence had been built upon destruction. Yet this human, fragile and broken, stood before her with unwavering belief. For the first time in her long and violent life, Zyraxis felt the weight of freedom. Her flames flickered, rising higher as power surged through her body. The guards watched anxiously, expecting her to strike. But she did not move. Instead, she stared down at Ethan, her glowing eyes filled with conflict and awakening purpose. "You are stronger than any warrior I have faced," she said quietly. "Not because of your power, but because you refuse to surrender your soul." The alarms continued to echo, and the Empress's command repeated through the chamber. Yet Xyraxis remained still. In that moment, the cruelest dragon in the galaxy faced the greatest battle of her existence, not against an enemy, but within herself. And at her feet, the human who refused to fear her still smiled. The prison chamber trembled as the Empress's command echoed again and again. Execute the human immediately. The words thundered through the metallic walls like a storm that refused to end. Red warning lights flashed across the chamber, bathing everything in a glow that felt both urgent and deadly. The guards stood frozen behind the reinforced glass, their claws tight on their weapons. They knew what was coming, or at least they thought they did. Xyraxis stood above Ethan Hale, her massive wings slowly unfolding. Flames flickered along the edges of her scales, and heat filled the air until it became hard to breathe. Every instinct within her demanded obedience. She had never defied the Empire before. She had never even imagined doing so. Below her, Ethan remained chained to the cold steel floor. His body was weak, his strength nearly gone, yet his eyes held the same calm light. He looked up at the cruelest dragon in the galaxy and smiled once more. "You still have a choice," he said softly. The words struck deeper than the Empress's command. Xyraxis's heart pounded like thunder within her chest. She remembered every world she had burned, every scream that had echoed beneath her wings. For centuries, she had been a weapon, nothing more, nothing less. The Empire had given her power, but it had also taken everything else. Freedom had never been part of her existence. Until now, the Empress's voice roared again, colder and more dangerous than before. "Xyraxis, obey your command, or you will be erased from existence." At that moment, the ceiling above the prison split open with a deafening crash. Massive warships hovered in the sky, their cannons glowing with destructive energy. The entire fortress shook as the Empire prepared to fire. The guards stepped back in fear. They were no longer watching an execution. They were witnessing a moment that could change the fate of the galaxy. Xyraxis slowly lowered her head toward Ethan, her burning eyes searching his face one last time. "Why do you trust me?" she asked quietly. "After everything my kind has done to yours, why do you still believe in me?" Ethan's voice was calm, steady, and filled with quiet strength. "Because I know what it feels like to be used," he said. "I know what it feels like to lose everything and still keep fighting. You're not just a weapon, Xyraxis. You never were." The dragon's breath trembled as his words echoed in her mind. For the first time in her long and violent life, she felt something stronger than fear. She felt purpose. The cannons above charged with blinding light. "Final warning," the Empress declared. "Destroy the human, or be destroyed." The chamber fell silent. Time itself seemed to pause. Xyraxis's wings spread wide, casting a shadow that swallowed the entire room. Flames erupted along her scales, and her eyes burned brighter than ever before. The guards braced themselves, certain the dragon would obey. But instead of turning toward Ethan, Xyraxis turned toward the sky. With a thunderous roar that shook the foundations of the fortress, she unleashed a massive blast of fire straight through the shattered ceiling. The flames tore through the air like a blazing storm, striking the Empire's warships with unstoppable force. Explosions lit up the sky, and the ground trembled as the fleet staggered under her fury. The guards stared in disbelief. "She's attacking the Empire," one of them whispered in shock. Inside the chamber, the chains around Ethan suddenly melted under the heat of her flames. The restraints fell to the ground with a metallic crash. Ethan rose slowly to his feet, unsteady but free. Xyraxis lowered her massive head beside him. "Climb on," she said, her voice filled with resolve. "This prison will not hold you any longer." Ethan hesitated for only a moment before stepping forward. With effort, he climbed on her armored scales, gripping tightly as she prepared to rise. Above them, more warships filled the sky, their weapons charging for a full assault. The Empress's voice roared with fury across every channel. "Traitor, you dare defy your creator? Zyraxis's eyes burned with fierce determination. "I was never yours to control," she declared. "I choose my own destiny." With a powerful surge of energy, she launched herself upward, smashing through the shattered ceiling. Steel and debris rained down as she soared into the storm-filled sky, Ethan clinging firmly to her back. The Empire's fleet opened fire. Blinding beams of energy streaked across the heavens, but Zyraxis moved like a living storm. She twisted through the explosions, her wings cutting through the clouds as she unleashed torrents of fire against her enemies. Warships fell from the sky in flames, their engines shattered by her wrath. Ethan held on tightly, his heart racing as he watched the battle unfold beneath them. For the first time since his capture, he felt the wind against his face and the freedom he thought he had lost forever. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with awe. "You chose your own path." Zyraxis's voice carried through the storm, strong and unwavering. "No," she replied. "You showed me that I had one." Behind them, the fortress collapsed under the force of the battle. The Empire's fleet retreated, their once unstoppable power shaken by the rebellion of their most feared weapon. As the flames faded and the sky cleared, Zyraxis soared higher, leaving the burning remains of the prison far below. For the first time in centuries, she was not flying toward destruction, but toward freedom. Ethan looked out across the horizon, a quiet smile forming on his face once again. The cruelest dragon in the galaxy had made her choice, and the Empire would never be the same. The sky above the Draconian Empire burned with fire and chaos. Warships drifted in shattered pieces, their engines destroyed by Zyraxis's unstoppable fury. Flames spread across the clouds as the cruelest dragon in the galaxy soared through the battlefield, her wings cutting through smoke and lightning. On her back stood Ethan Hale, holding tightly as the storm of war raged around them. Behind them, the Empress's voice thundered across every communication channel in the Empire. "Zyraxis, you were created to serve. You cannot escape your destiny." But the dragon did not slow down. Her glowing crimson eyes burned with a new purpose, brighter than the fire she unleashed. For the first time in centuries, she was not a weapon. She was free. Ethan looked across the horizon, watching the Empire's fleet retreat in fear. A calm smile touched his face once again, not a smile of defiance, but one of hope. "You changed everything," he said quietly. Zyraxis's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "No," she replied. "You did. You showed me that even the strongest chains can be broken." Suddenly, the sky darkened again. From the far reaches of space, a colossal flagship emerged, the personal warship of the Dragon Empress. It was larger than any vessel in the Empire, surrounded by glowing energy shields and powerful weapons capable of destroying entire planets. The Empress appeared as a towering holographic figure above the ship, her eyes blazing with fury. "Traitor," she roared, "you have forgotten your place. If you will not serve me, then you will die with the human." The flagship's main cannon began to charge, gathering a blinding sphere of energy. The power was immense, enough to erase both dragon and human from existence. Ethan tightened his grip on Zyraxis's scales. "We can't outrun that," he said calmly. Zyraxis slowed her flight, turning to face the approaching warship. The winds howled around them, and the glow of the cannon illuminated the sky like a second sun. For a moment, silence filled the heavens. "Are you afraid?" Zyraxis asked softly. Ethan looked ahead, his expression steady and fearless. "No," he replied, "because whatever happens next, we face it together." The dragon's wings spread wide, and flames erupted along her scales with unmatched intensity. Her roar echoed across the stars as she gathered every ounce of her ancient power. Below them, the surviving soldiers of the Empire watched in disbelief. Across distant planets and hidden colonies, beings from every species witnessed the moment through their communication networks. The cruelest dragon and a single human, standing against the might of an empire. The Empress fired. A massive beam of pure destruction tore through space, racing toward them with unstoppable force. The sky itself seemed to split apart as the energy surged forward. Xyraxis flew directly into its path. With a thunderous roar, she unleashed a torrent of blazing fire infused with her life force. The two forces collided in a blinding explosion of light that shook the heavens. For a moment, everything disappeared in fire and silence. Then the light faded. The beam shattered. Xyraxis burst through the explosion, her flames burning brighter than ever before. With one final surge of power, she struck the Empress's flagship, tearing through its defenses and engulfing it in an inferno. The mighty vessel exploded in a storm of fire and falling debris, its reign of terror ending in a single, decisive moment. The Empire's fleet scattered in panic. The Dragon Empress was defeated. High above the battlefield, Xyraxis hovered in the silent sky, her wings slowly beating against the fading smoke. Ethan remained standing on her back, gazing at the dawn rising over the horizon. The first light of a new day painted the clouds in gold and crimson. "It's over," he whispered. Xyraxis lowered her head slightly, her voice calm and filled with quiet strength. "No," she said, "this is only the beginning." Across the galaxy, word of the battle spread like wildfire. Civilization spoke of the impossible, a human who faced the cruelest dragon without fear, and a dragon who chose freedom over destruction. The story inspired rebellions, united worlds, and ignited hope where none had existed before. Ethan Hale became known as the man who refused to fear, and Xyraxis was no longer remembered as a weapon of cruelty, but as the dragon who chose freedom. Together, they traveled across the stars, defending the weak and protecting those who could not protect themselves. Wherever darkness rose, their legend followed, reminding the galaxy that courage was stronger than fear and choice was stronger than destiny. Years later, on a peaceful world beneath a golden sky, Ethan stood beside Xyraxis atop a mountain overlooking a growing human settlement. Children laughed below, and ships of many species landed in harmony. Ethan smiled, the same calm smile that had once defied an empire. "They sent the cruelest dragon to break me," he said softly. Xyraxis's glowing eyes shimmered with quiet pride. "Instead," she replied, "you gave me a reason to live." The sun rose higher, casting warm light across the land as the dragon spread her wings once more. And thus, the legend of the smiling human and the free dragon was written among the stars, an eternal reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope can ignite the power to change the universe.